Weekend, which in one sense is the unofficial beginning of summer, but certainly it is more than that. It is a day that is set aside to remember and honor those people who have died, and particularly, primarily, I guess, originally at least, those who died in our nation's wars. Memorial Day began as Decoration Day a few years after the end of the Civil War, and its purpose was to decorate the graves of soldiers who had been killed in that terrible war. And now it's a call to remember all of those who have sacrificed for country, and particularly for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Flags are often placed on graves at cemeteries of those who have been in the military, and the Ruitons and others did that yesterday here at the cemetery in McGaggiesville, and that is done many places. And that's the one focus, or I guess primary focus, but sometimes that theme of remembering is expanded a bit beyond that. And I think that's especially true in churches and denominations such as ours, the Church of the Brethren, where peacemaking has been an essential part of our history. And at my previous pastorate at Lebanon, Church of the Brethren, Mount Sydney, Memorial Sunday was a time in which we remembered and honored those in the congregation who had passed on, and particularly those who had passed on that previous year. On Sunday morning, Memorial Day Sunday being today, and they probably are still doing this, at the end of the worship service inside, everybody would go outside. The cemetery was right beside the church, and people would bring flowers that Sunday, and we'd have a memorial service there by the cemetery, and then the children would take those flowers and put them on graves around all over the cemetery. So moving time, and really a special time. I really appreciated the way that they did that and honored those who had gone before. Here at Mountain View, we have, I guess we've been fortunate that we have not lost any members in this past year. The last couple of years before that, we'd lost quite a few, and the last person who's a member who passed away was Don Reniker on March 31st of 2018, a little over a year ago. But at the same time, I was reflecting this week on how many of you have lost loved ones and people very close to you just in the last few months. And I'm going to name some names, but I'm not sure I have everybody, and I know we all have those connections we make as well. But just in the past several months, Patty Nicely's father died, Larry Erbaugh's mother, Mona Pence's brother, Stephanie Jackson's mother, Rhonda Weber's mother, Loretta Hawkins' mother, Grace Spart's sister, Judy Russell's sister-in-law, and I don't know how many more, but that's a very significant number of losses of loved ones just over several months' time. And while we grieve the loss of those we love, we retain the memories of their presence and the influence that they had in our lives, and those memories become quite precious to us. Over time, we often recognize even more the influence that those who've gone before us have had on our lives and on who we have become. We can remember them, we can be thankful for them. And it's appropriate that special times, such as Memorial Day, are set aside to do so. While our personal memories extend only to those we have personally known, nevertheless, our lives have been impacted by a lot of other people who came before them, their own ancestors, and the people who came before them throughout the generations. We all have both blood relatives and spiritual ancestors whose lives and stories have played a role in shaping who we have become and who we are becoming. I read an article in which the author states that an urgent task of theology and the church is to recover stories of people of faith in all generations, including our own. And he states that these sacred stories, these stories of faith of people, both in the past and today, those known to us, those not known to us personally, can be as compelling as the stories that we read in the Bible about characters there. And we're all aware that the Bible contains many stories of people of faith and courage. In the Old Testament, there were the patriarchs and many, many others who walked with God. A lot of sermons, a lot of Sunday school lessons point out these people of faith. And this scripture today from the letter to the Hebrews, it's a New Testament book. But here in chapter 11, the author is recounting the names of some of those from a much earlier time, from many hundreds of years ago, such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, later Moses and others who lived and died in faith, and yet who did not receive their reward in this life. But nevertheless, God provided something better for them, he says, beyond this life on earth. God cared for them, rewarded them. And then in the next chapter, that beginning of chapter 12, we find that these people are collectively referred to as a great cloud of witnesses who are there kind of like spectators in the stands, cheering us on, encouraging us, he says, as we run our race, as we do our work, as we attempt to live lives of faithfulness to God. And Hebrews cites some examples and calls us to remember specific people. But there are so many in the Bible, both the Old Testament and New Testament, so many who were faithful to God, whose faith was rewarded. A couple of weeks ago, I used the story of Ruth and Naomi. And that's just one example. And as I was doing it, I thought, boy, I need to search out more of these Old Testament stories that maybe we don't read very often, and remind us of the faith of these people and how they can be encouraging to us and encourage our faith as well. And likewise, we need to remember not just those of Bible times, but those who came afterward, the faithful to God down through the past 2,000 years of Christian history. There's so many of those, and their stories are often not very well known. But great inspiration can come from remembering and retelling their stories as well. Our middle school age Sunday school class, taught by Carrie Butler, is right now studying a book called Heart, Soul, and Mind, Becoming a Member of the Church of the Brethren. And this book is being used partially in preparation and training for those who will make the decision about baptism and church membership, which will be hoping to have a baptism later this summer. And I think this book is good, but it's also a bit frustrating. And Carrie and I have talked about that. I've taught this book before to other classes, and I have found it both helpful and frustrating. And the frustration is there's just so much here that you just can't really cover it very well. Or that's how I've always felt, that even if you use this book over, say, 6 months, which we're probably going to do all spring and summer, you feel like you're scratching the surface. For example, the first section in the book is the Bible. 5 lessons to cover the whole Bible. You can't do that. It's just a very brief overview. And then church history, where they are now. Some people are interested in church history. I am. Many people aren't. Not many middle schoolers are. It's a tough sell, right, Carrie? And you got 2,000 years to work with there in about 3 weeks. So what do you do with that? I don't know. I've never really figured it out. Then they have Brethren history, another week or so to cover 300 years of Brethren history. And then Brethren beliefs. Try to cover that one in a lesson or two. Like I said, it's not easy. And I never really felt like I did a good job teaching that class when I taught it. And I know I can be pretty boring as a teacher, but it's just so much. It's overwhelming. And I guess my problem is I want them to learn this information, information, facts and figures and people and history and events. And maybe that's not the main thing. One thing I like about this book is that each lesson contains a little paragraph or two called a Brethren biography. Just a short vignette about a particular person somewhere in Brethren history, and maybe they're people who are well known and maybe they're not, but they kind of illustrate a Brethren value or something important in the church. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just read a couple of those to you, give you a little hint of that. Here's one. Cyrus Baumberger was a farmer and preacher from Spring Creek congregation in Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. And this was probably 100 years ago or more. He had a reputation as a man of unflinching integrity. When he took his wagon loads of wheat to Lebanon to be sold, the miller there told his workers that they didn't even need to examine the wheat, either to question its weight or check it for moisture. For Cyrus Baumberger was a man of his word. He was the grandfather of Andy Murray, who memorialized him in a folk song called Granddaddy Was a Farmer. Some of you have heard that one. And the chorus of that is, he's a full measure man, he won't tell you a lie. When Cyrus rolls his wagon to the scales, you could just wave him right on by. Level on the level, signed with a shake of the hand, unaffected, well-connected, simple, honest man. And there's that Brethren value of simplicity and integrity. Page 60, this one, you may have heard of this guy, but didn't know he was Brethren. Sports writers called him the pole vaulting parson or the decathlon deacon. The time was in the late 1940s and early 1950s when Bob Richards, then a Church of the Brethren minister, competed in 3 Olympics, winning a gold medal in 1956 as a pole vaulter. In 1951, Richard won the Sullivan Award as the Amateur Athlete of the Year, and the same year he became the U.S. National Decathlon Champion. You may have seen his picture on the Wheaties boxes. Remember Wheaties? And they always had an athlete. Bob Richards was on there quite a few times. He grew up in Champaign, Illinois, where he was a member of a local gang. He was not a church member, let us say. But later, 5 of his friends went to prison, it says. And following that, Richard became a member of Champaign Church of the Brethren. His pastor encouraged him to go to college. He went to Bridgewater College here, and then Bethany Theological Seminary, and later pastored Long Beach, California, Church of the Brethren. He's quoted as saying, "I never amounted to much as an athlete, student, or individual until I was converted to religion. Christianity builds the total personality." Another interesting character. Page 26, Ted Studebaker. Ted Studebaker, who was from Ohio, declared himself to be a conscientious objector to the war in Vietnam. He did not hesitate, however, to enter South Vietnam in April of 1969 as a participant in Vietnam Christian service. Ted chose that organization because of its service-oriented nature, which was a logical extension of his Church of the Brethren background. He worked in the village of Zeeland with refugees who had been displaced from their mountain homes. He worked to increase their rice efficiency, introduce fertilizer, helped establish an agricultural cooperative, and helped build chicken coops. He built quite a rapport with these tribal people. After his 2-year service had completed, he decided to stay another year. He married another VCS volunteer from Hong Kong named Lee Van Pak. They had been married only a week when Viet Cong insurgents attacked the village and killed Ted in the lodge where he lived. The Viet Cong were nationalist guerrillas fighting the South Vietnam government, as many of us remember. Ted was considered to be an American, or just an enemy among some of those people. So those are just a few of the stories. You know, it helps us pick up the flavor, the values of who we are. And so that's something that gives me hope in trying to teach all of this material to young people or to any of us, is that none of us are going to learn all we need to know about our faith or beliefs or history from one book, and not even from the Bible or any other book. Because our faith ultimately is based not on a bunch of facts or teachings or doctrines, not that those aren't important, but ultimately it is about a living relationship with our living Lord, Jesus Christ, and also on the relationships that we build within our faith community, with other church members and those who teach us and mentor us and help us along the way. I remember reading once that someone said, faith is not so much taught as caught. Not so much taught as it is caught. We catch it from other people. It's something that we receive not from knowledge and facts that we gain, but from relationships, from observing and learning from people in our church family and others whom we admire and respect. Faith can be transmitted many ways. For me, my faith has been greatly enhanced by some trips we've been able to take. And I count myself, Mona and I count ourselves very fortunate. One trip we were just talking recently, Rhonda Weber, I know, is planning to go to the Holy Land, leaving on Wednesday of this week, actually. But that was just an incredible trip for us, to be in those very places where those biblical stories happened, and to be reminded of the details of those stories. It was so inspiring. I'm permanently changed by that. And also a trip to Germany and Europe for the Church of the Brethren 300th anniversary, to the places that the church started in 1708. And not everybody can or wants to go to those places, but there are other things we can do as well. In fact, we have one coming up. Our church is planning a visit to the Brethren Mennonite Heritage Center in Harrisonburg, right behind the Harrisonburg High School. It'll be Sunday afternoon, June 23rd. That's like 4 weeks from today, I guess. And the deacons are involved in planning this, and part of it is designed for those who are considering membership. We want our young people to go to learn more about the church and our heritage and history, but we want everybody to go, or everybody who wants to go. We can take as many people as we want, and I think it'll be a learning experience for all of us. So I guess I'm less worried about our young people learning everything that's in this book. That's not going to happen. I haven't learned everything that's in this book or any other book yet. I'm still learning. Faith development doesn't just happen that way. That's important, but it's more than that. Hopefully we can, what they learn and what we all learn comes through various aspects of church life. Through Sunday school, through worship, through vacation Bible school, through youth group, through going to camp, Brethren Woods, to whatever connections we make, wherever we are. We come together in those ways to learn, to observe. Faith is caught more than it's taught. That's very true. And hopefully it has and will continue to stick with each of us as we catch it. May we remember the wonderful words of what the Lord has done, Psalm 105 says. Remember the wonderful works the Lord has done. May we remember those faithful ones who've gone before us, as Hebrews reminds us. Those stories of faith from biblical times through the centuries, even until now, of those we have known personally and loved deeply, and whose faith has been a part of ours, as well as those who have lived long before us, but whose influence nevertheless has become a part of that cloud of witnesses. So on this Memorial Day Sunday, may we respond to that call to remember. May we remember those faithful ones who've gone before us and give thanks for what they have done. I'm going to ask India to come back up. In this book, there's a litany, a two-person